I mean,
You know that one, rolling.
it's probably the only one I know, but I don't think Limp Bizkit's on my radar.
It's not in your playlist.
When I go to the gym, no.
It's not in your pack out playlist.
People
You
have. Do
use
people
a
have?
playlist when you pack out stuff?
No.
You don't either. You're too old too. You're like
Yeah.
me. I bet you do.
No. I did on one of my hunts this year though.
Yeah.
In G-Bear country, and I'm packing up my mountain lion.
You were nervous?
I was just kind of bored a little bit, and I was like, "This is gonna suck. I need some like motivation through the snow to like get out."
Mm-hmm.
So I had it in my pocket, and I cranked it as loud as I could. I was like, "Well, I'm not hunting anymore. I'm switching to another state." So
All these younger guys got playlists. Like Neville, he's got.
he has a playlist.
I don't know if it's an actual playlist. I think it probably. I don't know if it's like a pack out playlist, but it's a. He just cranks up the jams while you're hiking. Keeps it.
Yeah, I don't know. It's not for me.
Not for you.
Not for
You
me.
like the silence, to suffer in silence.
Yeah, suffer in silence. Is a
That's
good
it. Yeah, I don't know. It's kind of nice though, I guess. So you ready to get started?
One. I'm always ready.
What do you got for us today, then?
We're going to talk with the man, the myth, the legend, Brandon Evans, on what we got going on. What's Insider been doing lately? What we got coming up? Dropping a nugget, something we're just releasing coming up here. Like he's going to spill all the beans.
We need Brandon's full title and duties. We've had you on the podcast before, but I don't know if we actually got to pick your brain a little bit about what it is you do and how long you've been here.
Oh, I do a lot. I'm the random guy.
Always more.
Title is head of research and customer service.
Okay.
Recently acquired the GIS team.
Yep.
Falls underneath me, the content side. We have two sides. There's GIS content side, GIS engineering side. So all the dev side I work with but don't oversee. So,
What's the difference between GIS content and GIS
so
proper?
content are all the content. So all the layers, all the information that is on the mapping platform.
Gotcha.
And then the engineering is who develops the platform
Yeah.
or works on the actual technology of it. So
I hear the word content. I think of content in different contexts, I guess.
I know, because I think we're so dialed in the written content world. Video content.
Yeah, written or video, but you're talking the actual layers, things that go into that.
yeah, what you view on maps is all part of that. I guess you could call it GIS data team as well.
Yeah. How'd you get involved in that? Are you a data nerd?
I'm becoming one. Yes. No. Got involved just more of, I guess you could call it a product owner.
Yeah.
So business representative for the business in that side. Got involved with the team, worked well with them. And then, yeah.
Seems like you have a knack for it.
Yeah. No, I did have a GIS or two classes in college,
Sure.
getting the degree that I got. So it's not unfamiliar to me, but it's been years since I've got on Arc Pro and actually did some type of GIS analyst work. But
Man, Arc Pro, there's a word I haven't heard in a long time.
right.
No.
Is it even remotely the same? Like
No,
you work
no.
with you work with the developers, right? And
Yeah, it is. Like it's yes and no. Like it's not what we.
Yeah.
It's not like when you were working with it with the division. It's not that anymore. No.
yeah, I mean, I
it's-
can't imagine. That's been probably 10, 12, 15 years ago, and you think just what's happened with everything else in technology at this point. I mean, I would assume that GIS has evolved at the same or similar rate, or more so.
Yeah, it's still kind of that cumbersome process. If you remember how just convoluted Arc Pro was, it's still that. You have to know your way around it a lot better than I do. So we have a super talented GIS team, and they do great work.
Yeah.
So,
I remember that being kind of like me in spreadsheets, you know, like I would have it in my mind what I wanted to do, and I would sit there and screw around with it and try different things and read about it and watch tutorials, and then somebody that actually knew what they were doing would just pull it up and do it in 5 seconds. But I mean, all the tools existed, but I had no clue how to use them.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's one of those things I wish I knew more about back in the day when I had it touched as well. Because like I always thought of these crazy ideas I could do with it for like hunting stuff, but I was like, I don't know how to do any of it. I can ingest all the data, I can look at it all, but I don't know how to manipulate it very well.
Yeah, I mean, I do and I don't. I mean, in essence, all that stuff that's being done on the back end is now at my fingertips on, GoHunt Maps. And it's, I mean, it'll do everything that I was trying to do back in the day on my own.
Yeah, that's the neat part about it is we don't have the skill to process that. We know what we want, and that's kind of the beauty of what I get to see every single day is like, you know what you want as a hunter. You know what would be valuable for you as a hunter. You try and explain that. They understand it to a degree. They build it. You make a few tweaks, and then it's a completely usable product at the end of the process. So it's neat to see the two sides work together to produce a product that's useful for a hunter.
But you have to have both. Like, you have to look at it through the lens of a hunter and end use scenario, right?
Yeah.
Like, and I can imagine there's probably some frustration or maybe not frustration, but just challenges in trying to work that through with a developer.
Yeah,
like, this is why I need this. And they're like, why?
But it's been, so part of that question, how long I've been here since the beginning. And we saw that in the very beginning. Like, it's the GOHUNT's 10th birthday coming up. Yep. And so in the beginning, it was exactly that. We had a team of hunters, and then we had a team of developers, and you get them both in the same room, and the finished product is pretty incredible. But it's interesting coming to a conclusion. We'll just put it that way. It's a process.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure. You've been here since the beginning.
Pretty much.
Like, so yeah, we were coming up on our 10th birthday. I think Lorenzo said, I think we're going to try to do another podcast where we just talk about, 10 years ago. It's hard to believe for me. It's already been 10 years. I mean, I think I've been here. It'll be coming up on, I want to say 8. It might be 7 or 8, but I can't remember for sure. But I mean, just in that time I think about it, but yeah, I mean, 10 years. It's
crazy.
Yeah, it really is. What employee were you? 3, 4?
I was the one right after Brady. 4
maybe.
So did you write profiles at all in the beginning?
I was going to start writing profiles, but then they just brought me down right away.
See, I actually started.
So probably did some profiles before I came full time.
Yeah, I did some in. Oh, it was like the end of 2013, the very beginning of 2014.
Mm-hmm.
I started writing profiles and shooting them over, and then I didn't get hired until October of 2014.
Yeah.
So,
I remember working on your announcement article back in the day. We did a big Q&A with Brandon Evans.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We
used to do Q&As for
is that still
the
live
new
on the
hires.
site?
Yeah, it's still live on the
probably
site.
is somewhere
We
if you
should
could
do
find
Q&As for new hires still. That'd be hilarious.
Yeah, we published a Q&A. It
should
was
go
like one of
back
those awkward, hey, this is from the editor. We're going to ask you a bunch of questions. And I was
we should go back and find them. That'd be fun.
oh, I guarantee we can pull them up. They're definitely on the website.
That'd be fantastic.
I probably looked like a baby then.
I still remember that one big old archery, was it archery velvet buck you shot back in the day or something like that in the Avalanche? Or was that a muzzleloader?
So I had the muzzleloader one I killed in the Avalanche. I have a 4x6 that I killed in Utah, and it had all the velvet hanging off of it.
Yeah,
and
I remember those old school photos of you back in
I'm
the day.
like King's camo, the original Desert Shadow. We were hunting southern Utah.
Mountain Mimicry. Or no, is that the other?
That was the Sitka one. The Mountain
Sitka one. What's
Mimicry.
the other one? What's their other pattern?
Oh, mountain. They have the shadows. The
Mountain Shadow and Desert Shadow.
Snow
that's
Shadow.
Yeah, that's right. I remember that. You did. You had a bunch of velvet dripping bucks early.
Yeah, I haven't had. The one buck that I killed on film is the only deer that I've killed in velvet that actually hung on to the velvet. Everything else is slid down rock chutes, and by the time you get the deer, it's stripped, and you're just hoping it had tine. So
those muzzleloader bucks.
I've got 2 muzzleloader bucks, 3 muzzleloader bucks, and a couple archery ones that all did the same thing.
Don't I recall you went to, used to be like a recurve on one of those high country hunts, right?
Yeah,
I had a bunch of photos like that.
Brandon hunted with a recurve for a long time. I remember.
That's pretty intense.
I'm too fat and out of shape to do that now. So
you ever pull it out and shoot some with it?
No, I shoot all the time with it, especially with kids. Yeah, I love shooting a recurve. It's to me, it's more therapeutic than anything because you don't have you're not as self-critical. So if you're not in the 10 ring or the X, you don't care because you're hoping to hit a paper plate at 30 yards. So it's pretty therapeutic. And with my boys, with my kids, I'll pull the recurve out and we'll shoot in the backyard. And
so when you're shooting in the backyard, you're not stressing out, huh? You're just relaxed. Yeah. I shoot and get frustrated most nights. It's a 50-50. I either go home feeling great or I go home being man, I suck.
And and it builds. It's the same muscle. It's just I think you build it better. If I can shoot my recurve all year, I'm way further ahead on the compound side.
So. That's interesting.
Yeah, it's a trick you got to pick up, Trill.
Yeah, it might be. Yeah, maybe I need to get a recurve. It'd probably help me overall, I'm sure. It would have to help your back muscles, just getting used to pulling into the wall, and then
Same mechanisms. You're just using finger tabs instead of like you pull through, and like when you can't hold it is when it breaks, and that's a good shot. So,
do you know what kind of bow is it? Is it the same bow you've had always?
I've got a lot of free curves.
Oh,
actually.
you do?
Yeah, I do.
You're building up
My
a
wife
collection?
hates them. I have some that I don't shoot. Like I've got a 50s bear. I've got an old Ben Pearson longbow that my wife actually got me for Christmas that I don't dare shoot because it's old. But no, I have everything from a Black Widow to like a Hoyt Satori, like the aluminum riser that you can do different things with. But it's the Widow that I probably like shooting the most.
Did you quit collecting like cars and car parts? And
No, I still do that too. No, that's the no.
do you still have a project vehicle?
I don't. I just got rid of one, and because we outgrew it, I had a single cab Chevy that was kind of rock crawler, and got rid of it because I have 3 kids now, 3 boys, and so I was like, I want to get like an old Blazer that I can stuff kids in the back seat and just go have a good time. So
yeah, 3 boys is probably eating up a lot more of your time than it used to.
Wild, yeah.
How old's your youngest now?
My youngest is 8 months, so I've got an 8-month-old, a 3-year-old, and a 6-year-old.
Gotcha.
So
man, you're right in the thick of it then.
yeah.
Your kids like hunt? They like getting out with your older kids?
Obsessed with it, yeah.
Really?
In fact, this last weekend I had to promise them we'd go scouting. So yeah, I had to carry the 3. I took my 6-year-old and my 3-year-old, and that was steeper. Where we ended up going was steeper than I remembered it being, and so I had my 3-year-old on my shoulders, and my 6-year-old's gotten real good. I made him pack all the snacks and a bottle of water. So up he goes, and it was fun.
That's cool. You grew up in Southern Utah, I know that, but I mean, tell people where you grew up and like, I mean, to me, I know your background, but like give people an idea of like your background and why it is you think you landed at GOHUNT.
Yeah, crazy story about how I landed here, but grew up in Fillmore, small town, central Utah. After that, went to SUU.
Were you there when fire blew through? You probably weren't, were you?
Which one?
All that when the big giant one that blew out through all those flats.
Through Milford Flat.
Yeah,
up
Milford
there.
Flat.
I was actually living in Cedar when that happened, but my folks still live up there. My sister lives up there, so that was a big fire that blew through there.
And it turned into a dust bowl there for a year after.
They've had crashes on I-15 because of it.
Yeah.
But grew up there.
It was bad.
Went to Southern Utah. Ended up interesting. Like I started the business program at SUU and got in like 3 years through business and took a natural resource class from, I don't know if you remember Dr. Bounds.
Yeah.
Took a class from him. Him and I connected really well, and he told me you're just going to switch majors. And I fought it and then ended up switching majors, got a wildlife biology degree.
Yep.
And at the time all of that was happening, I worked for Lorenzo's uncle, managing one of his tire shops, and that's when GOHUNT got thought up. He actually knew, so Big Heath is Lorenzo's uncle. He knew I was going to get a job at GOHUNT before they even offered it to me. They cleared it with him before
That's funny.
they even offered it.
They went to him and said, "How can you afford to lose this guy?"
Yeah.
Gotcha.
When can this happen? And he's like, this is the date. So, and then from there, while I was working there, that's how I knew that GOHUNT was going to get started, was with Little Heath and talking with Lorenzo and Porter. And they actually went to the Hunt Expo that year before that because Big Heath had a booth at the expo it was like the big 3-point that Little Heath had different things.
200-inch 3-point.
That 3-point's gnarly if you haven't seen it.
Yes, giant. And so that, like, I actually met Porter there, whether he remembers it or not, said hi to him, talked to Big Heath, Little Heath there. And then like that following winter is when I started writing profiles for him.
When they approached you with the idea, did it make sense to you?
100%.
Really?
Yeah. Like the big picture vision, because growing up, we always, like your background growing up, how we aggregated all that data was so cumbersome. Like I remember looking, when I first started hunting Colorado, the old draw reports, you had to download 2 different reports and kind of piecemeal them together to even remotely see what your odds were. And it was so cumbersome that I was like, no, getting that information in one area is going to be huge. And I remember talking to a few people in the industry that said the same thing, like, that'll be interesting to watch how it grows. So,
yeah. mean, that's for me. It kind of made sense. I mean, I'm further along down the road. I mean, it was already a developed product by the time I got involved, but I remember thinking, yeah, this makes sense. Like this adds up, you know, given how complex it is to.
And to showcase all the opportunity.
Yeah.
Not just trophy stuff. Let's showcase it all.
Yeah. Yeah. I think back on that. I mean, even, you know what, maybe 15 years ago, 20 years ago, like just how naive I was to even the possibilities that were out there.
Oh,
Just no clue. You know, there was really no way. I mean, there's a few magazines, but well, maybe one magazine, maybe two, but like even that, trying to decipher through it and put it all together was pretty damn tough.
Yeah. Pick up a regulation book. Oof. It's so brutal trying to figure those opportunities out by just looking at it, especially non-resident, trying to figure it out. Like,
so the GOHUNT just started out, I think I remember, I wrote unit profiles, and that's how you started?
Mm-hmm.
Just writing unit profiles? Was that kind of the gist of like, this is how this is going to go, is unit profiles? And because I remember thinking like, okay, this is it, you know, but like since then.
Oh, it's morphed into a whole new beast.
A whole different thing. It almost seems like, I mean, unit profiles, I still think unit profiles extremely valuable, especially when you get down to like the seasons and you can start to look at, you know, harvest trends for 5 years, and you can look at trends of data, you know, and you go through the profiles, there's information there I think is definitely useful, but it's almost like, you know, those aren't the primary tool I'm using anymore. I mean, there's more. I still use it. But
it's interesting. Like right now, we're actually, it's interesting because it comes full circle. Right now, I've got, you know, two of my guys on the team, Dave and Nate, are literally rewriting narrative in unit profiles.
Gotcha.
Like, and some of them were some of the ones that I originally wrote, and to be able to see, how units change over time has been interesting. But also, like how our style of offering that type of information has changed a little. You know, in the beginning, I remember when we first launched, we were actually quite detailed, and then kind of realized that we might have been a little too detailed, and we've kind of generalized some of the narrative and information that's within a unit profile. So it's still very valuable in getting someone started off, but what that did is allow us to spread some of the pressure, if you will, between units. I remember we had an employee that used our Idaho unit profiles to literally execute an entire hunt.
Just profiles.
Yeah.
Found a unit profile that he liked, matched what he was trying to do, and went.
And had an incredible adventure on it. And so, and it was like it lined him out. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, and we hear that all the time still. Like, hey, you know, those are the funnest emails that we get, is like, hey, use your product to find this, and you get a picture attached to it. And that's a raghorn bull from Colorado that they use unit profiles to narrow down where they're going to use an OTC hunt. So,
how do you manage, like in your opinion, how do you manage the, you know where I'm going with this already, I know, but like, how do you manage the kind of the flow of information? Like when is like giving too much and when is like not giving enough? Like, how do you feel about that? Because I know it's a comment we get, you know, from time to time, like, hey man, you gave away my favorite spot. You know, I mean, my family been hunting that forever. Or, man, I'd hope that there would be, you know, more specifics for like people that want to, you know, they want to know right where to go. Like, what's your thought on that?
We tend to err on I don't know, we have a pretty happy median, but we tend to err on a little bit more specific than just too generalized. Some unit profiles are going to be general, like antelope profiles in the state of Wyoming. Yeah. There's not a whole lot of difference.
Antelope need water. Yeah, antelope live on flats.
Not a whole lot of difference from unit 89 to 90 to 91. Like, they're just, it is what it is. But some of the others, you know,
especially in Wyoming.
Yeah.
Antelope exists in Wyoming.
Yeah.
That's the profile.
Go shoot one if you can get a tag.
Yeah.
But no, in reality, the product itself kind of helps dissipate the pressure, if you will. Because the more data points you can give someone to use in filtering and to filter, the more options that it naturally, it's the same, it's the lottery. Like, there's a reason they draw 7 balls with, you know, numbers from 1 to 50, because that combination that people can get is just, giant. And so the product itself kind of dissipates, you know, the hunting pressure, or people, you know, on the flip side, I'm sure, you know, people would love to get every single detail about what they've got to do on a particular hunt. The thing is, that's different for every person. Yeah. Like, the way that I would hunt a unit is very different from the way that you would hunt a unit. And so the way that I do may not be the best way. So if I were the one writing that profile, I may be misleading some people. And so it's more, those profiles are more meant to get someone started in the right direction, like what to expect from a unit, where to get started, general ideas, get familiar with it. Unit profiles were never meant to handhold someone completely through the hunt, you know. So
I think it's a good point. It's one that I think probably you and I have talked about before, but it's good to just revisit it, is that, what I want in a hunt, or, my methodology or the areas I like to hunt they're not going to translate over to everybody, And as you said that, I was thinking of examples. Like, I've given guys glassing points and said, go to this glassing point, and they've reported back and been like, man, I didn't see shit, And I'm like, okay, I get that. Where were you looking, And they were looking this way or that way. And I'm like, well, man, if you'd have turned 180 degrees and looked into the next drainage over, and maybe walked 50 yards over, you might have seen what I was talking about. But people hunt differently, I like low country if I can hunt it. If I can find a bucket or a bull in low country, I like my chances a whole lot better than liking high country. And a lot of people just absolutely love high country. And there's deer in both. It's like in a unit profile, do you say, hunt low for the biggest bucks, or hunt high? Because, it really just depends. There's deer in all of it. It just depends on how people want to hunt. But I was curious, because I know that over the years, I've heard both sides of the coin. So I was wondering how, is your opinion as a manager, how you manage that?
Like I say, we err on the side. I think in some units we give a lot of detail. We've heard from, it's interesting. We'll work on launching a new state, and a lot of research goes into putting a new state on the platform. And every single time you'll get an email from a member that's from that new state, and they're like, why did you give away X, Y, and Z? And we're like, man, that's some pretty general. Like, we named like 3 county roads, and it was like, oh, you gave away the honey hole of the entire state. And
it just happened to land on their honey hole, maybe.
Yeah, that's it's interesting. It's like an internal, like as a manager, I'm like, oh man, the research team rocked it. When you get an email like that, you're like,
it's kind of true.
Man, we absolutely hit that nail on the head. And on the flip side, it's like, okay, well, let's. He has a valid point. How can we generalize that a little bit more and still give good information? So it's a balancing act.
What is the process like for launching a new state? Because what we launched this last year?
We launched both Dakotas. Yeah, and we've actually been working on them for quite some time. There's you've got all the components. So you've got to learn the state, how it works, how the draw operates. I don't know how many phone calls we made to those states' agencies, and some people you get on the phone are incredible, and will walk you through step by step. Both of those states actually were really good to work with, like some of the better that we've had. Walk through how the process works, how, details that you don't get from a set of regulations or like a state statute. And so starts with that, starts with understanding the state. You break it down by unit, species, all of that. And then you're tying, I've got like one side of the team just is strictly data. So Michaela and Lindsay go aggregate all the data. So your harvest success, your tag allocation, all the numbers that we put into it. And then we've got writers that are familiar with those states that actually write the narrative. So it wasn't us that wrote the narrative in those. We contract that out, like what we did for our home states, if you will. Aggregate the data and then put it all together. You're getting draw data. For draw odds, those get processed by the data scientist, and that's a whole. Every state is so unique in how draws work, particularly when you start branching into some of the new states, like not the core, what you would consider a core Western state. Yeah. The Dakotas were different from everybody, and so you're explaining that process to the data scientist because he's not coming from that background. And then validation, we do a ton of validation on the draw odds side of things, but
so it's like years.
It took us a year and a half, almost 2 years to do the Dakotas.
Was almost 2 years, if I remember, because I remember you guys were working on it. when I kind of switched over to content, I think it was 2. It's probably been 2 years.
Yeah, had we done it, they always say hindsight's 20/20. I'd have broke those states apart and done one, focused on one, got it out. We kind of thought those would be a package deal, and that's how we launched them. And probably should have broken them and offered them individually, but.
As you did those, did it make you interested in hunting those 2 states? Like anytime you do a new state, what's your
always like you want
to go?
Yeah, you're like, hey, I can get that tag. Like that's the first thing is it's like I can get that tag, and then you're like, well, it overlaps with this, and I have to drive through these 3 states to get to that one. And I'm like, well, I know I'm already got a tag in this one, so why am I going to drive another 1,000 miles to?
Yeah.
And so anytime I work on a state, I get that way though. Like we were doing stuff. I never thought I would be interested in like Oregon and Washington. You start working in those states and you're like, I think I'm going to pick up that tag.
Yeah. I need to work more in those states, I think. This is what it sounds like.
Yeah, we're talking about that in another podcast.
Yeah. I'm like, I can't drive to Washington or Oregon. It's too far. Maybe Oregon. Oregon's interesting.
And they're like, yeah, no, well, and that's like Nate from our team lived in Washington for quite a while, and there's opportunity up there.
Yeah.
So
I know that I'm trying to think. It's been probably 2 or 3 summers ago. We drove my in-laws. Their family was up. They live there on the Oregon coast, and we drove up. And I remember driving through like Southwest Oregon and through a bunch of country. I was just like, man, this is just straight mule deer country. Like, and I know some of those are like more pristine. They're harder tags to draw. But I remember driving through it and just being like, man, this is incredible. This looks awesome.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it looks like home. The great thing about having Brando on the podcast and that you work for us is I feel like I can ask you harder questions.
yeah.
So I was going to ask you once. Let me ask you. I get this a lot, and mostly it's just people that feel comfortable enough with me to ask me the question. But just like the feedback, like, oh, all this data is available. Like you can get it on your own. Like you don't need a GOHUNT membership. You can learn to navigate state reports. You can find this information on your own. Like, what do you, I know you work here. I know that like you're the manager over this department. I know that like you and I both, we both work here and we're passionate about the company, but I was curious as to like, honestly, like what are your thoughts on that in regard to the product we produce?
See, and I'm flat honest with that. There are some states that you can get a report for. There are some states that are easier, are more user friendly, if you will. And some of the states are becoming that way. There are some states that I would argue till I'm blue in the face. New Mexico's a great one. Like being able to calculate a draw odd for the state of New Mexico with the way that the draw process works, you can't get that from the report that the state publishes. You just don't have enough data points and information to make that calculation. Mm-hmm. And so could you go through the public records request process and try and get that data? Yes. Do you have the skills? There's very few people, unless you're, a doctor of statistics, you're probably not going to be able to execute on the equations and processes needed. And are you going to spend the money to spin up some AWS servers to be able to process it? If you have that skill set, absolutely, you could do that from the state.
That's one of my favorite conversations to have with, management that works here at GOHUNT is we have this need for another person, for research, or maybe consultation if we ever went down that rabbit hole. And you and I have had this conversation, but I'm always like, well, who is it? Go find them. How many are there? Because they're just rare. There aren't.
Yeah, no, I'm kind of a geek that way, to be honest. Like I remember when I started to GOHUNT, there were states that I just wasn't interested in as a public land hunter. Like I kind of stuck to the core ones around my home state. So I wasn't super familiar with Montana. I wasn't familiar at all with the Washington, Oregons, Californias. And so I didn't know them. And I remember just spending evenings, like nights and evenings, just pouring through information on how those states operated. Like literally the nooks and crannies. You get into a state like Oregon that, the draw process in Oregon you would think is fairly straightforward until you start digesting it and realize that it's, an up to percentage. Half of that percentage can be taken from the outfitter draw. That's it happens even before the public.
So you're left with 2.5%.
Yeah,
and it's a preference point state.
Yeah, so being able to calculate all of that and understand it, most people don't go into that detail to even, they're just mad that they can't draw a tag in, a certain state. And so, I enjoy having that knowledge and being able to geek out and talk to those different points. Mm-hmm. They pay me to do it here, so I do it. But I do find it pretty interesting. We dig through, we get part of what we've just got done doing is we've been updating male to female ratios. We've been updating some of the data points on Insider and getting your hands on that data and analyzing trends and seeing what's happening, in very specific areas of a state, and then that state's overall trend, and seeing why are they managing, a resource a certain way in these 3 units versus managing it a different way in these 3 units, and helping that plan and kind of predict what you're going to do in the future, I think is very interesting.
And it's to scale. I mean, you're talking state to state to state to state.
Yes.
It's not like you're just tackling one state and one unit. It's looking at the whole bigger picture. And it's interesting. I've often wondered, it's like you said, I work here, you work here, you get paid to do it essentially. But I don't know. You have to kind of be into it too.
Oh yeah, no, you've got to be a junkie
Yeah.
or you would bore yourself to death. Like, it would be the most monotonous job. My wife looks at me that way, and it's like, what did you do today? And I'm like, well, look at this, what I just found.
Look what I found
in this state. And she's
Look at
like,
this Easter egg.
and she loves hunting. She hunts as much as I do, and she's just like, you're a nerd. And you're like, well,
Yeah. Going back to the original question I asked you, I was curious as to, how much time, like, comparatively, and I think the point is that I'm trying to make is just like, what's your time worth? Like, if you're at home and you're trying to, like, if you're hunting I've told people this outright, if you're hunting one state and you're, like, intimately familiar with that state and you know exactly what you want to do with it, how many points you have, how the system works, and you only ever plan to hunt that state, there's probably still something an insider that could benefit you, but maybe you could get by. But, like, if you're looking to apply in multiple states across the West and you've got points, you're trying to build it, and you're trying to put a permit in your pocket for, multiple species, like, the amount of time it saves is probably immeasurable.
yeah. And I would even, with the changes that are on the landscape now with state agencies, I would actually argue against that. Like, if you're not intimately involved in what's happening with your state processes, like,
Good point.
California or Colorado's instituting changes, Utah institutes changes every year, and if you're not following those, like, at a very high level, almost to the level that we are in this individual. I use my dad for example. He grew up hunting Utah, has hunted Utah his whole life. Has 2 boys that are pretty strategic in applying there. If he didn't have us, there's no way he would be able to keep up with the information and the changes that happened. And then on the flip side, the amount of, there's a saying that, like, you hunt where Grandpa hunted. Mm-hmm. Like, I grew up hunting this mountain range. I'm going to hunt it till I die. Why is my question? Mm-hmm. Like, areas change so rapidly. Like, for instance, I grew up hunting in Fillmore, the Pavant Range up there. It has changed so much over the last 10 years, both up and down, multiple times, that it's like, man, if you could have wasted, you're only going to get so many tags. Mm-hmm. Even if you're a guy that hunts one state, you're only going to get so many seasons in the field. Why waste them in an area that isn't optimal? Like, if you had your finger on the pulse, which that's what Insider allows you to do, it keeps you, it gives you the ability to find opportunity that you may not have known about. Mm-hmm. Even in your home state, some of the general tag, like, you look at draw odds, what they've done with tag cuts, draw opportunities. Yeah, I may have to travel halfway across the state to hunt a new area, but if that area is 5 times better than where Grandpa took me hunting,
or you can get a tag.
Yeah, or you can get a tag. Mm-hmm. Like, optimize that opportunity in your home state, because things are changing. Like, you look at how much Idaho has changed in the last 3 or 4 years. Like, the changes that are proposed in Colorado this year, the changes in Wyoming that went into effect this year, in your big, like, all of those are going to have an effect even to a resident, if you will. So
I was just talking to Adam at lunch, Adam that works here, and we were just talking about the over-the-counter elk tags in Utah. And how that system's gone. Now they sell them on 3 different dates. You've got archery, you've got any bull, rifle, and muzzleloader, and then you've got spike, rifle, muzzleloader. Those are on a cap now. The muzzleloader and the rifle tags. There's 15,000. There's a certain percentage. I think it's 4,500 that are any season up to that. I
grabbed one of those. By the way,
did you? You grabbed one? Yeah, but those kinds of things. That's all. It's always developing. It's new this year, and I don't know how you stay up on that other than, you're like you and I, and you just live in this world constantly.
Calendar reminders.
Or you're an insider.
Yeah.
And a lot of this is just going to be shameless plug. And I'm okay with being shameless about it, because I genuinely think it's
valuable.
It's valuable.
No, 100%. The funniest story about Insider and the value there is, if you remember when Ben, that used to work for us.
Oh, yeah.
him and Brady went on a hunt together, and Stoner literally found the exact same hunt that he was looking at. He was looking at it for different reasons. Stoner just plugged all the information into GOHUNT Insider, and it kicked out the exact same hunt.
Yep.
They ended up with the same tag, unbeknownst to each other, and then he ended up hunting it together. Like, I was like, that solidified the power.
Yeah, somebody brand new.
Brand new can find what I
And Stoner's his last name. He's not a stoner.
No.
His Stoner's his last name.
Yeah.
We should say Ben Stoner. But yeah, I mean, that's pretty incredible.
So
It's powerful.
Yeah.
Like I've always said too, like I lived in Montana for, close to 10 years. If I would have had Insider back then, I would have hunted in totally different areas. I was just hunting out my back door. Like you said, you hunt where grandpa hunts. I was hunting where my friends hunted. Why? Well, just because
that's what you knew. That's the information you had.
the only thing we had, and we weren't very successful. We could have drove 3 hours away and been way more successful for the terrain that we like to hunt and the tactics we like to use, but we just didn't know any better.
Where were you hunting, elk or deer?
Elk, that's probably why.
That's probably why you don't know how to hunt elk.
That's true. That's true. Let's be honest.
You'll figure it out.
Going to this year, aren't you?
I'm going to this year, yeah.
You'll
I'm gonna
figure
whittle
that
everything.
one out.
I'll figure it out.
Elk are easy to hunt, Brady. They're bright white. They're the size of a horse. You can't miss them with good
Scouting them has
glass.
been so fun. They're so
And
easy
they,
to spot.
if you hunt them the right time of the year, they literally scream at you,
That's
telling them
right.
where they're at. So
They do.
Elk are easy to hunt.
Dumber the
Yeah.
better.
Dumber the better.
Yeah. When did filtering come in? Like, when did that whole process? Because
That was a little later, actually.
was later.
Like, what we originally launched with, did you work some of the shows? And they?
oh yeah, I don't remember. I don't honestly remember when filtering came in. I remember unit profiles, and I remember working that.
It was the basic filtering at first.
Yeah, it was more. It was more of a sort than
Yeah,
a filter.
I would probably
Like
call it
you
sort.
could
That's better.
sort like by state and species, and it would give you information. The old one, like you'd get to a unit profile, you had to make like you weren't filtering by a number, if you will. And then about a year, I think filtering came in about a year after, and then draw odds came in shortly after that. It took us a bit to get it. I remember sitting in the old war room, just debating draw odds with Dave Novelli and just having outright just
Knockdowns.
and Dave was our data scientist at the time, and like he knew way more about numbers than I will ever know. And so like he could prove it was fun because you would have a gut instinct about what you would expect to see, knowing how draw process works and the data that you were looking at, and he could prove to you why you were wrong, like statistically. And you're like,
that's frustrating.
okay, we're gonna go with that guy. So
Yeah. Filtering. I'm trying to think, like, how did you decide on filters when that got set up? And I'm curious as to, are there any other filters, like looking forward into the future, like in your mind, are there others that you would like to see that you think could be potentially helpful?
absolutely, yeah, and they're actually on our roadmap moving forward.
Okay.
You'll see some of those. So part of what my research team is doing right now is we're aggregating new data sources. So to throw them out there, like population trends. I would like, part of what I would like to get away from is some of our data is a single year type data point. And I think there's huge power in seeing a multi-year trend or seeing averages. So being able to say, okay, this unit, as opposed to seeing, 65% harvest rate from last year, and filtering off of that number, give a user the ability to say, show me a 5-year average of harvest in that unit.
That'd be sick.
And so being able to produce, have our front end allow the user to toggle averages versus most recent year. And then, those of us that come from the biology side, male to female ratio is a great indicator of herd health and herd dynamic, but it pairs well with a bunch of other data points. And so bringing in, male to female ratio in conjunction with, total population is a powerful, collaboration. So giving the user a little bit more data and a more, 3 or 4 more data filters, if you will, then spreads the group of people out even more.
Yeah.
So the more filters we can do. So we're like population, hunters per square mile by
I like
unit,
that one.
Yep, that's a big one.
or like number of animals per square mile is a big one in my opinion, because you could have, like in Colorado, they do game management units that could be a cluster of 5 hunting units, and you look at a population for 5 hunting units, that may be a big number, but when you actually do the math to break it down to animals per square mile, you may have a an actual lower number than a single unit with a decent sized number.
Gotcha.
So I think there's some power in getting people that information, because a lot of people don't come from a background that they need to draw a tag that's going to offer them the chance at the biggest buck on the mountain or the biggest buck in the state. They just want to go have a good time. In my opinion, a good time is finding animals.
Yeah.
So put me in a unit where there's a whole bunch of animals and let me play around with them. And, if I shoot a spike bull or a cow, it doesn't matter to me. I just want to go have a good time.
Yeah. I like the idea of averaged, like an average harvest success over trends, like over years. There's so many times when you look at an individual, you filter by a year, or you go into a unit profile, for example, you just look at the latest year, and you compare that. Maybe Brady had an elk tag in that unit the year before and just didn't kill one.
Didn't kill one's not a good elk hunter.
So, but yeah, I mean, it can, and it's like you're saying earlier that different units have rises and falls in terms of habitat conditions and populations, and even just the people, especially when you get into hunts that the number of tags are relatively limited. I mean, it might have been who had that tag that year.
Yeah, what are they holding out for?
Yeah, what are they holding out for, or what are their abilities, and maybe didn't find success. And you look back and you average that out across 5 years or 10 years, and you're starting to see a better picture.
See, and that's, I think, looking at it, I think I know I automatically do that. When I go into a unit profile, I'm looking at the average bar. Like, something that I just do by nature. And so a lot of people we found out don't have the inkling to do that. Like, they don't know why they should be looking at averages, why they should be looking at trends. Particularly, we always hear during draw odd season, like the points creep, kind of that whole buzz that comes out is like, it says I had a 100% chance to draw. I didn't draw. Well, if you go back and look at that trend, it's jumped a point every single year for, 6 years, you would project that it would jump, another point. And so being able to identify the trends and building tools on our platform that do that for you, so you don't have to have kind of that root knowledge and kind of understanding to look for things, I think will help a lot of people.
I had a conversation the other day at a gas station with somebody that you and I both know really well. And I was talking about a deer tag that I've got. And I just mentioned to him, I said, yeah, there's probably not a ton of deer in that unit. And he says, yeah, but it's better than that. There's just not a lot of hunters either. He said, I'd take less hunters than a lot of deer any day in my life, And that's kind of the way that he looks at it. But that got me thinking, post, I'm like, man, that would be a pretty sick filter, just to see kind of the number of hunters, like you were saying earlier, just the amount of pressure, and it'd be cool just to see, trends in that regard too. That was a little bit easier to process, because I think, there's magic in that, Yeah,
because I think we all think about the big picture things all the time when we're applying. We look at
but
everything collectively.
We're nerds.
Yeah, we're the nerd of everything. But it's like individual person probably doesn't understand. Oh, yeah, you have to look at draw odds. You have to look at hunter pressure. You have to look at how many OTC elk hunters are in there at the same time.
That's going to say a perfect example of that, and how you calculate that hunter per square mile is not only are you considering the hunt code or skew that you're talking about, like that deer tag in Colorado, that third season deer tag you're looking to draw. And what you need to realize is there may be 2,500 elk hunters in that unit as well that same season. So not only are you competing against the 150 deer hunters that you're trying to draw that tag with, but you've also got all those elk hunters running around in there, same dates.
Yep, muzzleloader hunters maybe in Colorado.
Yeah, so knowing what you have, out on the landscape, I think will be a powerful.
When you go to filtering 2.0, like what's the first filter you go to?
Personally?
Yeah.
Trophy potential.
Okay.
So trophy potential, I do like a combination of filters and sort. Like I'm going trophy potential, sort at highest to lowest male to female ratio. Then I get into draw odds, and I guess I take the mentality of, in a lot of the states, your harvest number is only as good as the reporting from the state. And some of the states are really good at it, some of them aren't. And so I take harvest success with a grain of salt, if you will. I hope that I'm more proficient than the majority, and so that I kind of err that filter down a little bit personally.
Explain the sort filter. I think a lot of people don't realize we have a sort option as well as filters.
So there's on that screen on the right-hand side, if you're on the desktop on the right-hand side, you've got all your filters that you've got the slider bars or the points you can put in. But at the top of that list, there's a little sort button, and you can select, whether you want to sort them highest to lowest alphabetically, which they're defaulted to, or like male to female in my case, or harvest. You can sort them by the highest, harvest success to lowest. And so what that does is just helps my brain kind of rank
Process
them, if
it.
you will.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What was I'm curious what the process of getting into draw odds was like. Was it overwhelming at first?
It was very much. Yeah. No, it's
had to have been.
yeah, it was. Like I say, it took months and months. One, we had to identify what data we have to have to calculate odds, because in a lot of states it wasn't available. It's still not publicly available in a lot of states. So what data, and then working through, some states require you. There's a state out there that requires me to do a public records request. I have to have that public records request notarized by a notary of the public. Submit that in mail form or fax, and then pay, and then they will accept or reject it, and I have to pay the money to process that request, because it does take time. Like, a lot of these aren't quick data pulls. And so, figuring out that was the first hurdle, was just getting the data that we felt comfortable, in aggregating to compute a draw odds, and then finding out the right methodology and process and equation to produce what we feel are the most accurate odds out there. So.
And it's always funny when I hear, well, Montana has draw odds in their regulation book. And I'm like, have you ever looked at their odds?
Yeah.
It's not your true draw odds.
No, they're terrible.
How do you answer that with somebody? I mean, we hear it a lot. I hear people say oh, I can look at my draw odds at any given state report. Some states you can, and I think if you have a decent understanding of the state, you can somewhat. I say somewhat because I'm even thinking a state like Colorado that's pretty straightforward as far as preference points go, right? You can look at it, but then again, the reports are ginormous and they're by individual hunt code, and to look at to compare 2 different or 3 different hunts is a complete fiasco. It's really complicated, but how do you address that question from somebody? What's your thought?
Typically, I'm upfront and open now. If they were just looking at Colorado, it comes down to, yes, you could find your odds of drying. I would, for most species, you start talking the big 3,
yeah,
it's out the door, because they have a weighted.
Goat.
Yeah, at that point, you're introducing a bunch of math that is not really that straightforward.
That's a pretty sweet process the way they do that.
Yes, wonderful. But on the deer side, it comes down to that. Are you just sent on, I want to hunt X unit in X season, and I just need to know how many years I need to apply? Because if that's the case, you could get that information from the state, and I'm open with them about that.
Sure.
But my follow-up question is, why are you looking at that unit, and why are you looking at that season? Well, it typically goes back, well, that's where I'm familiar. I'm like, man, you're sitting at, you've got this many points. The current state of Colorado, you may not catch that hunt for a decade. Why aren't you looking at these 10 options? Mm-hmm. Well, what are those? And at that point, it's hey, if you had a filter that you could look at multiple units, put in criteria that you want out of a hunt and look at other options, you might be hunting this year versus waiting, 10 years. Yeah. And so there's that. There's, to your point, there's the ease of comparing units. Some states, they just you can't get from a state report. Colorado's one of those that, if you were just looking at the state report, you could technically get that information.
For individual hunts.
Yeah, for an individual hunt.
But you literally have to go through and use the Control F function and find each individual hunt code and then compare those. Yeah,
and I will say, on the draw side, it's more straightforward. We get questions all the time on Colorado's harvest reports.
Sure.
If you've ever looked at Colorado's harvest report, they're pretty convoluted. You need to know what part of that report to look at for the season you're wanting to find.
Yeah, they give total harvest. They give bulk bull harvest. There's all kinds of, and it depends on the hunt. If it's got
depends on the hunt code, if it's an EM or an EE or.
Yeah, their harvest report's kind of.
So.
I've been doing it for a long time, and even I look at it from time to time and have to go back and scratch my head and be like, is that the right one I looked at? Nope. Got to scroll down another 6 pages, to find it. But I think about Wyoming. Wyoming puts out draw odds reports, but you're looking at 4 different reports essentially for a non-resident. If you want to look at your odds, you're looking at regular, special, preference point. You're also looking at random for each one, and then you have to understand how their draw system works to see why there might be potentially some that go to the secondary draw, and then you're like, how does that work? You know, it's like essentially you're looking at 5 different sheets to try to understand potentially what your odds might be.
And that's a lot of time.
There's a lot of time. It's complicated. It really is. I mean, every year when I write when I look at them, I look at our odds, and you're going back through and looking things. I mean, it's complex. I mean, I wouldn't sugarcoat it any way, but it's tough.
So we have a million tools on Insider: Hunt Planner, Filtering 2.0, Draw Odds, Point Tracker, App Strategies. What's your favorite tool we have? What you lean on most?
I go back to your Filtering 2.0 and Draw Odds. It depends on the state on which one I use. Some of the states that I've hunted for decades now, I jump straight to Draw Odds.
Because you know them, yeah.
Yeah, because I'm literally comparing, a dozen hunts and just seeing where they fall, what I want. Like other states, Idaho's a perfect example, as I'm not tied down to one area, so I jump into filtering more than I do. And you don't know, like with the way Idaho's process has gone, like I need to have a list of 10.
You do.
And so it's not like I'm, so I'm using a bunch of different criteria that's offered in filtering to make that list, if you will. And so like a state like Idaho, I use Filtering 2.0 and then the Hunt Planner tool. And literally while I'm online waiting for that December 1st deadline, I've got Hunt Planner with my 1 through 1 through 4 or 5.
Rank them.
Yep. So
what do you think for a new hunter? Most powerful tool for them?
Man, I would like a brand new hunter. I usually point those to the state profiles, state and species profiles. Like if you can identify what you want to hunt, like that's a question that we get a lot is I want to hunt the West. Typically they're wanting to hunt elk. Like that's kind of the magic animal in the West to hunt.
Magic animal.
So, if you can jump into Colorado, it's like state profile, it runs you through how to get started in that state, what options you have. And that's like a brand new hunter. Because once they figure out, I can either draw a tag or I can just buy a tag, at that point they know which way to go into Filtering 2.0.
I do think a lot of people kind of forget about the state and species profiles. Like there's a lot of good gems in there.
And that's, so we update those every year, and a lot of the parts of the app strategy articles actually get infused into state profiles. There's a lot of crossover information in those. So
there's a lot of information you need to know even before you apply. Like whatever your hunter ID number is, you have to carry your hunter safety certificate in the field, like all the little crazy nuances, like you'll find it right in there.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot of info.
It is a lot of info.
How do you tell somebody to? So I mean, a new insider, joins the platform, and whether they've got some experience or really none at all. I mean, how do you get started? Do you think? I mean, it's hard. I think it can be hard. I think we need to do a better job at that. Probably just even on the content side of like helping people understand like where to get started.
And anybody that listens, if you're not familiar with it, reach out to us. Like I've got Nate, Dave, Braden, they'll all jump on a phone call with you.
It's a good tip.
Give us a call, shoot us an email, say, hey, I don't understand things well. We're more than willing to walk people through it. So
yeah, that is a good idea. Just to maybe reach out if you're having some confusion about it.
I think we do have some pretty good videos out there in how to use different things, and so you can find the content on YouTube. I think there's even a playlist that's kind of insider focused, if you will. Watch those. But like I say, if not, reach out to us. We're more than willing to help people.
I want to go back to draw odds real quick. You mentioned a couple times that you have a data scientist. Like, why do we have a need for a data scientist? And specifically to what states, what draws, what are the nuances of it that you can think of, and why would you need it?
We use them for pretty much every state, and it's just the math and the statistics that go into producing an odds. Like when we use New Mexico, you can apply, your first choice, second choice, third choice. They're all considered when they pull your app. Well, if you just took total number of applicants that had that hunt code on their application versus the number of tags, that's your absolute worst case scenario you could come up with. Oftentimes, applicants are going to draw their first choice or their second choice before they get considered. So if someone draws their first choice, their application shouldn't be counted in your odds for their second and third choice. And so part of it is the level of detail that we get there, but then putting it in and actually running it through that script or algorithm, I don't know how to do it.
You model it, right?
We do model them.
It's a model, it's a simulation.
Yeah, each state gets a different model. So that's part of the complexity is if every state ran the draw the exact same way, we could probably write it and automate it and have somebody just push a button. But every state is different in how it works. And then it seems like every single year they present their data in a slightly different way. So you have to reformat.
You're welcome.
Yeah. So it's... Yeah, it's a fun process. It's literally a process, and we kind of geek out on it. It's not that we just run that through. That our data scientist, puts the data in, gets the data out. We literally go through every single hunt code and verify and validate it.
Yeah,
and it's
How are your eyes after that day?
It's not even a day. It's like a 4. It's like a 4-month deal.
Yeah.
And
That's like that's like him and his team just sitting there at their computer every day, spot checking odds, looking at odds,
line by line.
Yeah, line by line.
What's fun is when states then have because you've got a set of, we get the raw data, and so we get a set of data that's a little bit more definitive, accurate, if you will, and then with any large data transfer, there's prone to errors and processing errors. So then you get a public type report, and you'll look at some of the numbers on the public report, and you're like, those don't match.
Brandon's always finding those.
And so, yeah.
He always used to be like, come look at this. Does this make sense to you? You're like, nope, that doesn't add up to me.
So then what goes on?
We try
to verify the data, I assume.
So we go through a process to verify which one is correct and why, and that way we have an answer as to the difference, if you will.
Yeah.
But yeah, and every state has that. It doesn't matter. I think it's just the amount of data that gets produced are prone to those.
In regard to draw odds, like what are the most commonly asked questions that people get or misunderstandings, if you will? And what do you think?
I think the number one is whether they're predictive or not. And we have looked at predictive odds in the past. We've produced some, and there's just so much variability between individuals and choices being made that it's very, very hard to do a predictive odds. I would be very skeptical if somebody ever said, hey, we've got a really accurate predictive odd, because you look at what happened in Arizona this year, and people wouldn't have predicted, some units jumped 7-8 point levels this year. And it's a combination of, they got a ton of moisture. Mm-hmm. It's been a drought year the last couple of years. They cut some tags in some areas. And so you've got this whole compounding effect that this year people are more committed to burning points than they ever have been. So you had people going into the Kaibab early hunt, and they burned a ton of points to pull that tag.
Because they saw all those big bucks shot on the late hunts, and they were like, hey, I'm going to get first crack at those bad boys.
Yeah, look at me too. I have a ton of antelope points, a ton of elk points in a lot of states. In some of those states I never apply. I just build points. Mm-hmm. So how would you do a predictive if you never know when I'm going to jump in, and all of a sudden I'm going to jump in with my 12 antelope points and just draw a hunt, party up with my dad, try to get a tag. That's where the difficulty comes in. And you can't predict that.
In looking at the data, we've seen that. More and more in today's, it used to be that you'd be like, I want to get into that hunt just within a point.
Well, I think more and more, I think more and more people are willing to jump ship and look at a different area to draw a permit. Then it's like you were saying, I think a lot of us back in the day, we were pretty well committed to the areas that we knew and we liked to hunt, We hunted out the back door. We hunted granddad spots, So I think that's what we applied for. And I think now, we're kind of looking at what we have for points and what's available, and we're jumping all around. I think about my applications. What a disaster. I'm going all over the place.
No, and that's I would have been willing, in Arizona this year, I would have been willing to just burn points to get into a tag down there.
Yeah,
just
kicking my own ass that I didn't.
So
I could have drawn a late archery tag, and I certainly should have, based on what I'm seeing so far.
Yeah.
So
when you say predictive, what? So they're not predictive. Odds aren't predictive.
So they're based off of the previous year's draw data, which is, and like I say, we pull that data from the most recent draw that happened, and we're pulling the amount of data that we can process how the draw worked and give you, your chance of drawing that tag based on what happened last year. With that though, the way that I think part of the big value that I see in our draw odds is how we present the data. If you jump into what we call the draw odds detail page, so if you go into draw odds, put your filters in, and then actually click into the unit you're interested in, it will give you a multi-year trend. And that's what I go to look at it. And then I'm making a decision, has it stayed at 4 points for the last 4 or 5 years? At that point, I'm pretty confident it's going to take me 4 points. If it's jumped, like if you, like look at the Arizona Strip, like is a perfect example everybody talks about. You can visually see it jumping a point every single year. And it's like at that point, if you're not at that point level, you just won't live long enough to catch the hunt, unless you're one of the lucky random, if you're that lucky, buy a lottery ticket. But
unless they change management.
Yeah, or I've never seen more talk about changing draw processes or changing point systems. There's a lot of change on the landscape across these western states to try and address that.
Do you hear anything specific?
Colorado's
any
got
interesting rumors?
You saw Wyoming make changes, and then they voted down the bonus point strategy, and so that could have changed. That's a state that I probably won't apply for those 3 species.
I don't.
So it's just not,
No
what I
sheep
mean?
and goat.
Yeah, just not
Me
like
either.
if you do the math, it's
Not worth it.
nope. And so, some of the things Colorado, is talking about point banking or changing. They're changing the allocation to how many tags they allocate to non-residents, but they've got a committee that's looking into how they can address points creep. And it may be, they've talked about points banking. They've talked about a few other solutions.
What do they mean by point banking?
So, like, say you had 20 points going into a hunt, you were the high point holder, but the next one was only a 10 point. It only took 10 points to drop. Well, they're only going to take 10 points out of so you go into
Like I
next
keep
year
my
with,
extra points.
Yeah,
I love this.
They
idea.
did that. I don't know if you were,
I'll vote for that one.
I don't know if you were.
I'm gonna take all my elk points and burn them on a 3-point unit, and then retain whatever I got left
I
over.
want to say when did they did that for like a year?
Really?
Yeah, they
I don't
allowed to
remember
do
that.
it. I want to say it was in the early 2000s.
I'm here for that one. Let's do that one.
It didn't work then. I don't know why they want to revisit it now.
I can't
but
imagine it would help because
in my opinion, it perpetuates it.
It
Like it's
would.
like
Yeah, it
you
makes
got
it
these
worse.
high point holders, and these low point holders are just getting screwed because they can't. Like, there's people drawing 2 tags before they get to draw one.
The guy's gonna go on 2 10-point hunts.
Yeah.
Do you think there is a fair way to reset the system?
Man, to define fair there is pretty difficult.
Yeah, like you have those guys who are so dedicated, they have 20 years of their life invested into it. Now you're going to change things over. Or
honestly, though, like if you, some of us are vested in that, so it's hard to be like, detach yourself from it. But at the end of the day, the state has never guaranteed that the point system will last forever. Like I get that you've invested and that you're 20 points deep. They don't owe you anything from those 20 years, in my opinion. Like you've got to manage.
You might storm the Capitol on that one.
But you've got, like, at the end of the day, you have to manage for the resource, in my opinion. And if you can't do that under the current systems, you're never going to please everybody, I guess is a good way to do it.
I mean, we're just talking about we don't apply in Wyoming for the big 3. So, like, that's a lot of money the state's not getting. Could we just know we're never going to draw a tag? So why would we go and support that? Why would we apply in that state for those species? It's like, that's a scary factor we might come into down the road. Kids, how are they ever going to get tags?
Well, it's
But
not
they're never
scary not scary for residents of Wyoming. They love that.
Yeah.
And there's a debate to say that, there are some people out there that say residents should fund their own wildlife. And currently that's not happening either. The vast majority of funding through state agencies is coming from the non-resident side.
Mm-hmm. The old resident, non-resident debate. Whew.
But
that's a hot topic.
Yeah, that's a good one.
That's a good one.
I wanted to ask you, I'll let Brady talk about maps because I know he loves maps.
Yeah.
More than I love maps. I like maps, but not
after the Live a Say podcast. You're getting a little bit more excited.
I
about
did
maps.
like that one. I did learn some things from Mark that I thought I could probably use that if I had the time and the attention span to sit down and do it. But I wanted to ask you about the quote unquote the GOHUNT effect. And what do you think about the GOHUNT effect? And
that's not a term we came up with, by the way.
That's
the interwebs.
We didn't term that.
No.
Is GOHUNT ruining hunting, in your opinion?
No, we've showcased opportunity. And so by doing so, has it increased 100% participation? Absolutely. Like, I don't view that as a bad thing. Again, going back to funding states, like they have to have hunters in the field to operate. Like you talk about hunters, or hunting is the true form of conservation. Well, the more hunters we have afield, the better that is for hunting in general. And so to that point, though, I've had people hunt areas that they never would have had. Like they wouldn't have even thought about hunting particular areas. So, on the flip side, have we showcased opportunity? Absolutely. Have we, exposed someone's secret? Maybe. I don't know if we have or not. I don't know.
Not purposely.
No,
say, yeah.
but because of just showcasing opportunity, have we exposed some areas of opportunity that may have been kept secret somewhere? Possibly. I don't know of any. I don't think with the amount of information that is just out there right now that there is truly a secret to Western hunting. I just, there are very much strategies that you can apply to acquire tags every year. But we share some of those strategies, but I don't think that, we have ruined hunting, if you will.
Yeah. I was curious as to what you thought.
I bet if you ask someone who lives up in Wyoming whether we ruined hunting or this last winter is going to ruin hunting, they'd probably side on the winter kill versus what we've done up there.
Mother Nature, huh?
So
Yes.
I think there's a lot of factors. You talk about, from southern Utah, the big buzz is about the deer herd in southern Utah. I think drought has done more for the deer herd, or has done more to the deer herd in southern Utah than hunters have.
Yeah.
And so I think there are some factors that you just can't control that have a bigger play in what hunting is than
Do you
a
talk
platform.
to people that tell you like, oh, I can't get a tag anymore, there's nowhere to go?
I get it all the time. Yeah.
How do you answer it?
It depends on the situation. Sometimes I just chuckle and leave because it's like,
Yeah, you're right, bud. Sorry about that.
Sorry
about it.
Like growing up, like when I go back to the hometown, they know what I do now for a living, and it's that way. Well, how could you get a tag? I saw you on a YouTube video. How'd you get a tag for that? And it's like, man, one, you've got to buck the trend of I just need X deer tag in southern Utah. Like, just give me a tag in Utah. At that point, it opens up your horizons. Like there were tags you could have drawn this year in about every state, whether you're willing to or not. Are you going to draw the Pavant early rifle elk tag this year? No, probably not, unless you're sitting at 30 points or whatever.
Yeah.
So I think it goes back into just showcasing. You've got to be willing to branch out and venture out of the comfort zone and learn, and then you'll be able to put tags. I haven't gone a season yet, knock on wood, that I haven't been able to pick up a tag.
That's a good point.
So
And there's always tags. Just what
Yeah,
you're
I mean,
willing to go do.
I'm constantly, I guess like this year I've drawn 2 deer tags and that's pretty much it. And I'm thinking, it's kind of a light year for me as far as I go. But then, I start doing a little looking and I'm like, oh, okay. I still have an opportunity. I mean, what do you have left? I mean, maybe run over it real quick just to maybe let people know.
So yesterday, the Nevada first come first serve came back, and I saw 2 non-resident tags pop up
Oh, you did
yesterday.
see non-resident tags. Perfect.
They were
Non-residents?
non-resident.
What were they?
They were both cow elk tags,
Oh.
but they were there, and I could have bought one had I wanted.
Yeah. Okay. Cow elk doesn't get me like so excited, but
But
if it was an antelope tag, I'm an archery
Trail's
antelope
looking
tag.
at an antelope.
I'm jonesing for an archery antelope tag.
So there's that left. There's the Colorado leftover list is going to start generating in August. I think August 9th is the first day you can buy tags.
That's people that return their permit.
Yeah. So and then that'll happen every week until those seasons are done with. You've got the Idaho, turn back list, if you will. Your Colorado OTC that just is always there.
Yeah,
You're probably going to
1st.
take advantage of that this year. Sounds
August
like
1st, I think. When is the Idaho one? How often do they do that?
Right now, it's usually once a month, but starting, I think it's in August or September, they do twice a month.
Okay.
And it's always the tag list comes out on a Tuesday. You can buy those tags on Thursday at 10 a.m.
And those are any
Mountain Time.
tags that are general season tags or controlled tags, right? That they've drawn.
Control
once they're
tags.
past the second draw.
Okay.
Control
So
tags about August 5th through the 15th.
Yeah, and as soon as they're through the second draw, which we're through, I'm trying to remember.
In Idaho?
In Idaho.
No, it's coming up.
Okay. Got you.
Yeah, that's the 5th through the 15th.
Gotcha.
You can apply for
And
that.
then anything beyond that would just be released on the list, and it's first come, first serve, right?
Yep. And then I'm not sure when the Montana one was, but there were some archery elk tags on the Montana leftover list if you're up in Montana and can pick those up. So those were available.
Still got Utah over-the-counter archery, which is unlimited.
Unlimited.
And then the late hunts?
the late any bull tag is unlimited.
Late
so you
any
could
bull
pick
tag
those
unlimited.
up.
That's right. And you still got, I guess, Oregon coast, right, for elk. Those
Yeah,
are
you got
over the
some
counter. Get some
over-the-counter
general
in
season
Oregon.
stuff there. There's still a bunch of
Gonna
hunts.
be, like if you're willing to hunt California, there's always some leftover deer tags in California. You
Nope.
can pick up 2 tags down there.
Brady, you going to California? Hunt mule deer?
That's the one on my list because I wanted to kill a mule deer in every state. That's gonna be my last one.
What if you go to California and just kill a buck of a lifetime?
What are the odds of that?
Actually, there are big deer killed in California every single year.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Maybe not on the over-the-counter archery tag, but there
Yeah.
are, like, every year you see a buck come out of California that you're like, how in the world?
Yeah.
But no, they're there.
Man, now my head's turning. I'm still thinking about all the opportunity I've still got out there.
There's a lot.
Like, you want to archery antelope hunt, they offer those in Colorado.
Yeah.
So you could go OTC on that.
Just have fun place to hunt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's actually, and that's, you go back, like, that's all the opportunity, that's all showcased on the product. Like, if you really wanted to go hunt, you could go do it.
How do you, so moving over to maps. I mean, I just mentioned, you mentioned the archery over the counter antelope in Colorado. And then, immediately I said, if you could find a place to hunt, so that kind of transitions me over to maps. And how do you think maps, like how does maps fit into the entire platform?
That maps, but to answer your question, there's a very specific set of layers that I would use to identify that. One, jump in and look at their walk-in access. Like there's some, there's some private land in some of those units that you're just going to get, you probably are going to have competition. You may not. It's interesting. Archery antelope hunting in Colorado is not as popular as you would think it would be. So
Probably not.
you may or may not have competition on those types of properties, but they still offer that. So like that's a very specific use case on where maps comes into play. Is like, I can buy this tag. Where do I go hunt? Well, here's some layers that come into the planning process of that. But overall, I think that for me, that's what maps is it's like, I need maps once I've got a permit. Once I have obtained a permit, at that point, I'm going in and starting to e-scout. Sounds like you had a good podcast with Mark. He divulged a ton of information in that process. And then, that's kind of the playbook that I'm going into the hunt with. That's where I'm going to have plan A through Z, if you will. And depending on what weather does, it's very dependent on how I'm using maps. Whether it's an early season archery deer tag in the high country versus a third season transition.
Yeah.
I'm using maps, I'm using different layers within maps to help identify and pinpoint where I'm going to be on the landscape for those particular seasons.
We've done a lot of talking about using maps just to e-scout, and I think if you boiled it down, it's probably the one of the primary, or if not the primary, use case scenario for maps and layers, and every the tools that our maps has. I was actually surprised, like as I was going through application season this year. Maybe not surprised, but I was using maps a lot, like in conjunction with my application. So I was looking at things. I'm thinking specifically in Wyoming for mule deer. I used maps a ton. I'm looking at things like fire layers, and I'm comparing units at my point level that I could potentially draw. Back to the maps and the layers. The migration, the fire layers, the public land layers. I'm using it way more. It's probably just because I work here and I'm using both of them, but I'm using those way more during application season than I ever thought. You?
It's a very powerful tool during app season. Like for me, I want to know where's that public land at, and is that public land in a good area in that unit where I think a mule deer buck might be hanging out. So I really want to look at it. I want to look at layer stacking. I want to get a late season Colorado deer tag. I want to stack some migration layers on top of the public land. Figure out where those burns might be and try to find that middle ground where all those stuff overlap. Like, hey, that could be a good spot in that unit. I have the points, I could draw that tag, or what's that unit next door? And then jumping over, looking at OTC elk pressure, like where's that gonna mix in? And
I use it all the time for antelope.
Antelope's a big use case.
I use it all the time because I'm always looking at my draw odds to draw an antelope tag, like a state in like Wyoming, and I'm looking at the units, and I'm like, okay, I'll have this many points, and these are my options, and then I'm immediately going to maps, and I'm comparing the units that I'm looking at to the public land layers in those units, and they're like almost they're congruent, right? So
absolutely. The more public land there is, the harder it is to draw. So you're analyzing, okay, I've got this many points that I could draw. Is it worth Like, is there enough public land there that I could be successful in it?
Yeah. I just talked to a guy. We were at TAC last weekend, and we talked to a fellow that was shooting behind us, and he was saying, yeah, I've got this antelope tag in Wyoming. And I asked him what unit, and he told me what unit. And I was like, oh, man, I kind of hope you got a plan together for, hunting that, because there's not a lot of public land in that unit. And he was kind of showing me or telling me where he thought he had some access to jump off into that unit. And he was doing his research, and, some of it I agreed with, some of it I didn't. I was just kind of like, well, okay, I hope it works out for you. And maybe I'd think about here and I'd think about there, because I've kind of been through that area. But, it just made me think, like, here's potentially a guy that has an antelope tag that it may not end up being a great hunt for him, is what I'm saying. Like, he may think he's going to go up there and have a phenomenal hunt. You might get up there and look at it and be like, there's really nowhere to hunt. Yeah. Like, I can't find a spot to hunt. So I don't know. I think it's definitely worthwhile using it during, application season. And then I think you're right. I mean, we've talked a lot about e-scouting. We talked a lot about e-scouting with Mark, and then, the ability to roll all that information into your actual hunt and get out on the ground.
Mm-hmm. But even jumping back to like app season, like I could take elevation bands and knowing like, hey, I want to go to Colorado. I want to hunt high alpine mule deer. Well, I can turn the 10,000, 11,500 foot elevation bands. I can see all that alpine where it's at in Colorado. See this, put the unit boundary layer on as well. Jump back over to filtering 2.0. Now I know a baseline of some of the units to look at rather than the whole state, and kind of narrow it down. Like, I just want to go to Colorado. I want to have an adventure. I want to be up in the alpine chasing high country velvet bucks. That's going to give me a great starting point to figure out what units to apply for.
I would actually do that. So back in the day, I liked. The reason that I started bow hunting alpine mule deer in Colorado was trying to take the variables out of the hunt. Like back then, the second and third season were
like where they might be.
Yeah, it was like or so many dependencies that I couldn't control. Like a second, third season, fourth season to a degree, it's dependent on weather, migration, whether they're going to be timbered up or not timbered up. Like, at that point, looking for that very specific terrain, above tree line, they're not going to be timbered up. Like, finding a very specific tree line that helped me eliminate variables that I couldn't control. And I felt like, okay, I'm playing with them on their turf in the most controllable situation that I have. What I need to worry about is them seeing me or smelling me, and whether I could get to them or not. And so those were the only variables I had to worry about. I didn't need to worry about them, having a good snowstorm the week before to kick them down in, to start the migration, to like.
It's a good argument for early season archery hunts.
Yeah.
And muzzleloader hunts.
That's kind of why I went that route. Is I felt like I could get it done better and took some of those uncontrollable variables out of the hunt.
Yeah.
So,
what do you like about We're Gonna Go Hunt? What do you dislike?
What do I like? The number one thing that I like is helping people hunt, helping people get out in the field. Those are the most enjoyable emails you get. Is like when being part of the CS team, you guys get it through social media. I get it through emails and being able to respond to somebody and give them, help them along the journey. Like, a lot of times it's going to be a first time Western big game hunter that just wants to go hunt elk in Colorado with a bow and arrow. And it's like, man, helping them just, even as much as just being like, hey, check out these 10 units. Like, I know I've had success in these 10. I've had friends had success, and they go and actually either have the experience of a lifetime or they actually do harvest an animal. Like, that is incredibly rewarding, because you're sharing the passion that I grew up doing. And like that's, you talk about hobbies or passions. This is what we do. This is what I do. And so being able to share that with people is probably the biggest joy, and the like of hunting it or working at GOHUNT is you're sharing your passion with anybody and everybody. Being able to dive in and geek out on what we've talked about in the details, and that's what we did in the free time. I get paid to do that, if you will. The things I don't like about it, I've found so much opportunity that you almost overbite or overcommit. Like, I've had years that I put so many tags in my pocket that you just are scrambled. You're not successful on any of them, and you're like, and so it's like, it's like people, it's like in the gear shop. The more gear you look at in the gear shop, the more gear you want to buy. So you end up poor. And so it's more.
Yeah, I always click on the newly added link and I'm like, damn it, need that. Like
That's a scary tab to look at.
Yeah.
And so like being so exposed to it is probably a detriment to
I mean, so I talked to a lot of people. I mean, I spent, a couple days at TAC and we talked to just a ton of people, and there's a lot of people ask me all the time, do you like working in the hunting industry? How would somebody get involved in working in the hunting industry? And like, are you glad that in fact, we had a guy stop me. He works for the state just right now, kind of like I did, I was curious, do you feel like working within the hunting industry, do you still feel the same about hunting as you did when, before it? Do you feel any differently?
Honestly, I've got a different perception of the industry, if you will, but hunting as a whole, like hunting in general, no, I've got the same perception. It's still my true love, if you will.
What do you think about the landscape of hunting, like in the West right now?
It's changing. It's evolving.
How do you feel about it?
I'm optimistic about it. I've seen some states that have been pretty inactive, if you will, take a bunch of action to better hunting and the resource, and so I'm optimistic in that measure. Honestly, I think hunters bicker too much. Like, you know what I mean? And you hear that all the time, but it's a privilege that we have to be able to hunt. It may, it's a very real factor that it may not be here forever. And so I think it's a heritage that we need to protect. And you can't do that if you're not, in unison and collective and have one voice. I think it's gotten so political. You've seen states make changes through legislation that have overrid biology, and that's scary to me. That tells me that, as hunters, we need to get smart and be able to combat that, if you will. Like there are real forces trying to eliminate hunting out there, and so but overall, I'm pretty optimistic about it.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about for sure. I think about it quite a lot. I grew up in the 80s, and then the early 90s when I was hunting, and I remember my first few deer hunts, and I think about those experiences. And if I'm honest, I think I'm getting a better experience now, and it might just because I'm a better hunter, but like I generally think I see more animals. I feel like it's better hunting. I feel like I have way more opportunity than and some of that comes with knowledge. A lot of it comes with knowledge, of different states and going different places and just general hunting knowledge. But I think in a lot of ways, comparatively, I think we're in a good spot. To me, it feels like. I think it's becoming more competitive. I'm kind of like you. I think a lot of us bitch too much about it. I think we bitch too much about the lack of opportunity. I think we get real tribal. I think we get real competitive. I don't know if that's just because, a lot of us are men or whatever it is, but like, I agree. That's the kind of stuff that bugs me a little bit. But so I was just curious.
That's a good one. I want to jump back to maps.
Yeah. Sorry. I get all philosophical and Brady's like, I still got questions about maps.
We're getting way deep here. I don't know, this is
my bad. Well, this is the interesting thing. I was sitting here talking to Brandon, and I thought, I work with Brandon, and I worked in the same office as Brandon, and we've had a lot of conversations over the years, but like, I don't remember the last time we just sat and had a conversation.
Yeah.
So it's
that's why the podcast is fun.
It is kind of fun.
The details. We can go for hours more. I want to dive into some of the new stuff we got coming out on Go Hunt Maps.
Okay.
So we just launched historical imagery. Maybe walk me through that, and then the new release on mobile that we got coming out.
So historical imagery, if you haven't seen it, is exactly that. You can take satellite imagery and just go back in time with it. And the more we've talked about it, I had some pretty specific use cases as to why I wanted it and how I use it. But the more that you talk about it and talk to different people, like the use case for that tool is endless.
Yeah, we've been doing a bunch of content pieces on it. Every time we do another content piece, I'm like, oh yeah, I think I thought of it that way, but you said it a little bit differently, and now I thought of this other new use case for it as well. Like, endless.
So it's pretty powerful. I've used it quite a bit already. So some of the mobile side of things, one thing that we're real passionate about is our topo, and it's available on desktop. But we call it the GOHUNT topo. It was a topo built by one of our GIS analysts, to be honest with you. That is a hunter tried and true. And it's unique to GoHunt in the fact that hunters created this topo for a very specific reason. It's not a outdoor rec. It's not a sightseeing type topo. It doesn't have, all of that type of information baked on it. We've simplified some things and we've amplified some things. So like a topo, if you know how to read them, the green part of a topo is vegetation. The white part is open terrain. And so we're able to more accurately depict that. So when a lot of times people use a topographical map to navigate with in the field. And so it's for
That's
people
what I
to
do.
know.
It's easy. It's clean.
Yeah, it's
For
clean.
a colorblind person like me,
Probably even better.
oh, it's so great.
So we've made that accurate. We've cleaned it up. And then you've got obviously the topographical lines on it. Those we've kind of accentuated with some types of, we call it hill shade. It gives it a 3D effect and allows you to really see what the terrain is like on the map. And so it's got hydrology or water sources built into it like a normal topographical, but it's very purposely built for a hunter, so they can navigate with it. It's simple to use, simple to see, simple to read. You're going to identify, saddles, steep slopes, pinch points, different things like that are all very visible in a topographical map. So that's going to hit the mobile app in the near future.
I'm really excited
which
for
will
that
be, and that same type of simplicity is going to be laid into our hybrid map as well. So that's all coming down the line. Other things on the mobile side. You'll see some download improvements coming right around the corner. So you're going to see a
Offline map download.
offline map downloads. Speed's going to increase a bit. You shouldn't be affected. Like the process to download maps should still be the same. It's just going to get better. We're improving there. That's been a big commitment from the business, if you will, from GoHunt is to we knew the map. The mobile app wasn't as great as it should have been last year and last hunting season. We realize that now. Hindsight's 2020. Could we have done things differently? Probably. But I will tell you, in working with the GIS teams and then working closely with the engineers, we've rededicated the whole company to that app and really being able to move it forward. And I think you've tested it hard for the last month and haven't had an issue straight. And that was one of the neat things that I kind of got a spearhead was an internal testing program. We called it Testing Fridays, if you will. A good excuse to get out in the field and just hammer on the app and use it how hunters would, if you will, in the field, offline, dropping waypoints, sharing waypoints. And so we've done a ton of just stability improvements over the last 8-9 months.
So do you feel like going into this fall, it's in a much more stable place?
I'm 100% confident. I run an iPhone, so I know we've still got some issues on the Android side that we're working on. But I've used the iPhone, our iOS app, if you will. Yeah, I'm 100% confident in. I've put it through multiple tests, like things that I wouldn't even normally do as a hunter. I've been putting through the test, and so I'm real confident in it right now.
It's good because, I know it's interesting. I can't even fathom like how you would approach this or tackle, a mapping app, a mapping platform, with all that it is. And I think initially we thought, I don't know if we thought it, maybe you tell me, did we think it was going to be easier than it is?
Yeah, we did.
Right. And I don't think there's any shame.
Complex.
I don't think there's any shame in saying it.
No.
You know what I mean? I think we bit it off and, we got it to a point and we realized, there needs to be a lot more stability, just a lot more reliability built into it. And I think at that point it was just a shift in focus and a realization that like, okay, this just needs to be a shift and we'll do it. And it does feel to me like it's in a hell of a lot better place than it's ever been. And the other thing I like about maps is it just works in conjunction with the platform as a whole. It's like a little ecosystem. You know what I mean? You've got shop, you got points in the shop, you've got your draws, your filtering, your app strategies, your state information, you've got maps. It's just like this catch-all. It's like a little ecosystem for everything that you need. So
Yep. Yeah, I like being able to use it all year long.
yeah, I know.
One
If hunting
platform.
season were just all year long, that'd be great.
Can we make that happen?
I don't know. Talk to Porter.
You could make it happen if you wanted to.
I know we had those little discussions. Like, there's all sorts of stuff that happens in the spring.
It's a
in the
dream.
winter.
There are big game seasons going on right now in the West.
It's a dream.
We can go to Hawaii.
Oh, I'd love that. That'd be rad.
I mean,
Let's get Hawaii on the old Insider, huh? Should we do that? What do you think?
We could do it.
I like it. I love that idea, actually.
yeah.
That's a great idea. It was born right here. Hawaii.
Hawaii. Let me add that to the list.
Just a little-
No, we
a little-
and we
a
do
little
have we do have more states that we're planning to add down. You know, we're talking new states already. We launched 2. We're looking at a couple more. You know, more data, more filters.
Yeah.
You had
So-
some more species. Turkeys.
So we've added
Javelina?
yeah. You look at Arizona and Mexico. We added javelina turkey to those. You know,
we got Gould draw odds.
that's what I was gonna say. The
Haven't
big
really
ones
talked about
down
that at
there
all
is Gould's draw odds. Like if you're a turkey guy,
Not, but
Come on, Trail.
there are like 2 of them.
they're out there. Those are the like, man. If you looked at the draw odds for Gould's turkey in Arizona,
Are they ridiculous?
oh, it's worse than elk.
Unbelievable.
Like
So you're saying my mid-teens points isn't going to get me?
you're not
anything
even in
long
the
time?
ball game.
Yeah.
Like you're 2 decades from drawing that tag.
Unbelievable for a turkey.
So
I just like supporting Arizona.
I hear
I
you.
like giving money.
Well, Cody's telling me our camera's going to overheat, so we better wrap.
until buy a new camera.
Any- Anything else you guys wanted to ask Brandon?
No, I think that was a really good
Brandon?
podcast. I could do a lot more of these with Brandon, or just like get you back on, talk about your hunting season. We can't really get into that, but that could be another time.
I know that's what's a bummer, huh?
Yeah. We're knocking on the door of the hunting season. I just want to talk about hunts.
I have deer tags and elk tags.
Yeah, what do you have? I don't even know what you have.
We're just going to get into it.
I've got a Utah deer tag, Idaho deer tag, Utah. I've got drew the spike tag, and I'm trying to pick up a couple more tags.
There you go.
I like that strategy.
So-
Pick up more tags. We need to go hunting more.
I love it.
We go
Well,
hunt.
thanks for coming on. I appreciate it.
You bet.
It
No,
really
thank-
was genuinely good just to sit down and pick your brain a little bit about it. I mean, a lot of this is maybe sound like a little bit of an advertisement. I don't even care because I think there's a lot of value in it, just
Yeah.
in helping people understand how the platform works
Yeah.
and what's available to them and what you can do with it. So I think it was good.
And we got
Appreciate it.
a promo code for you guys.
Oh yeah, hit it.
Well, you just got to use promo code podcast. Sign up for Insider. We're going to give you 50 points back in the Go Hunt Gear Shop. That's $50. Gives you access to the entire Go Hunt membership ecosystem.
Yeah, you spend $150, you get 50 back. You get maps, you get filtering, you get odds, you get app strategies.
Everything.
That's it.
And you're going to have a more successful season.
Podcast.
Promo code podcast.
You're gonna drop mic after that one.
I was going to, all I have is a shoe can. All right, we out.